Welcome to Life is But a Stream, the web show for tech leaders who need real-time insights. I'm Joseph Rise, technical champion and data streaming evangelist here at Confluent. My goal? Helping leaders like you harness data streaming to drive instant analytics, enhance customer experiences, and lead innovation. Today, I'm talking to Todd Smitala, Technology Solutions Architect at the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. Representing over 27,000 flight attendants, APFA plays an important role in making sure its members' voices are heard loud and clear. But what happens when outdated tech gets in the way? That's where Todd comes in. Our guest today shares how building a cutting-edge data streaming architecture achieved incredible results. You'll hear the tools and strategies Todd used to make it happen. But first, a quick word from our sponsor.
Your data shouldn't be a problem to manage. It should be your superpower. The Confluent data streaming platform transforms organizations with trustworthy, real-time data that seamlessly spans your entire environment and powers innovation across every use case. Create smarter, deploy faster, and maximize efficiency with a true data streaming platform from the pioneers in data streaming.
Joining me now is Todd, Technology Solutions Architect at the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. How are you today, Todd?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Joe.
Excellent. Well, let's jump right into it. Tell me about the APFA.
Okay, we are the union that represents the flight attendants at American Airlines. There's about 27,000 of us right now.
Fantastic. So tell me particularly what you and your team do at APFA.
At this point, I do pretty much anything technology related. I was brought in just after COVID with a new leadership team that came in. It was some young blood that was coming in as well, and they wanted to do a little bit more focus on data and tech revamps, things like that. So I was brought in. I'm a flight attendant as well. So I was brought in to bring a flight attendant perspective to a website redesign. And at that point, we were also heading into negotiations, and they wanted to kind of take a different approach to negotiations this time. Usually, that whole process is completely secret and silent, and we don't know anything until they actually come up with an agreement, and then they present it to us, and we have 30 days to read 200 pages and decide if we want to vote on it or not. So this time they said, no, we want to put on the website, we want to bring this information out, we want to work with social media, we want to make sure everybody sees every step of the way until we get to that. And so I was in charge of making sure that happened. And that's how I got started there. And that really brings us into the data streaming thing. The big project that I've been working on in these past few years is really, we have a member database that when I got there was on an enterprise server in the closet and has all the information. You know, there's
I've been there before.
You've been there, right? It's from 2014. Yeah. It's fine. You know, we had up until that point, it was just people that were in the office, a few people interfacing with that. It was okay. But at this point, what they wanted to do, not only revamp the website, but they wanted to use that enterprise system. It has a web portal as well. They wanted to bring that out and make that available to all 27,000 flight attendants. So I immediately knew that we'd need to take that one out of the closet and put that in the cloud. That was
right before, it would be taken out of the closet and like put it in a server rack, like in a proper server room. But now you just go right to the cloud. You got to skip that.
You went right to the cloud on this one. Well, because of the longer term things, what we wanted to do with this, right? So they wanted to have a single sign-on experience. They wanted people to be able to go into our WordPress website and then also be able to access that member portal and not really know that they're in another phase and another platform, anything like that. So
right, they just wanted to look seamless.
All seamless, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was coming from, I'm a developer, so I was coming from a React and Node and Ruby on Rails type of thing. So I was thinking immediately of OAuth. You know, that would be a nice way to handle the identity management and all of that. So we sat down with Okta to see about how this might work. And we had our WordPress site was not a regular WordPress thing. You know, it wasn't a simple thing that you kind of, you know, any person can go in and create their website. It had to become so specialized because of the limits to certain areas for our members. We had to have a team actually handling it. So there's a WordPress team that does that part. And then we have the team that's handling the server side as well, any implementations there. So all of us got together and everyone thought, well, Okta's perfect, let's do it. But then the cost came in, and you know how that goes. So leadership said, we can't do this, we can't afford this. Plan B, which was, okay, let's work with these two teams and we'll come up with something that I call Frankenstein. So we have this little, this login means of logging in and having that single sign-on experience between those two very specific two platforms. And it worked okay initially until we had our first big vote, the strike vote. So we had a number of big votes coming along. Our first one was a strike vote in July of 23, and we did expect a lot of people coming out for this vote. We did a big campaign. We did town halls. We did a lot of Instagram, a lot of emails, all that kind of stuff, telling everybody, you need to log in at this time. This is when the vote's starting. It's actually set to be a month long, but here is our mistake. We started the vote on the 27th or 20, maybe it was 28th of July.
Okay.
And then we ended it on the 29th of August.
Okay.
But a lot of people read just the 28th to the 29th. They thought it was a one thing.
They thought they had one day.
So literally when it was time to log in for that, we had a good amount of those 27,000 people logging in immediately at the vote opening. They thought it was only one day. That alone really overwhelmed that WordPress type of hosting server infrastructure that we had anyway. And worse than that, most of those people did not remember their login credentials. So they were all clicking forgot password. And that enterprise system, it's not designed for that at all. It basically collects any emails that need to go out for a 2-minute period and then batch sends them. So you can imagine how that just spiraled. It was just an absolute nightmare. We had to do
this is a great setup. APFA's data streaming setup has accomplished some really impressive feats. I know we kind of set up how things were, but I know things got much better. So tell us, how did it affect your ability to engage with your members?
If we look at the results of that strike vote, we had about a 93% turnout out of all of the ones that could vote. And it was overwhelmingly yes. It was over 99% that said yes. So, that was a pretty good turnout. That was something that we really wanted for that. And even with that Frankenstein setup, we still managed to get that. So that was important.
Wow. Okay, got you. But then of course, with all that back pressure from that day one that exposed the problems. Yeah.
The problem is for when we have other votes, like for the actual contract, it's not a given. We really don't know. People need to really understand that and make the proper decision. And so that's the one that we needed to make sure. Not only did we have a high voter turnout, but that it was easy for them to do. So it was extremely, extremely important for us to do that. So that's what happened. After the last one, the management our leadership team sat down with me, and the president in particular said, you have full range. You can do whatever you need to do here. Don't worry about the budget. Just make sure that this works for the next time. And we knew it would be coming within 6 months to a year. So they said, just go ahead with that first plan. If that's going to be the best one, whatever you can do to make sure that people are able to log in very easily, that there's not going to have this whole backlog of trying to reset their passwords, all of that kind of stuff. Have an ease of access to be able to vote. That's what we want.
Walk us through what you built, with all those requirements in mind to tackle this problem.
Right. And just taking one step back here, if you've noticed, we haven't said anything about data streaming at this point, and
That's
it really
true.
hadn't even entered my mind at this point either. So that kind of gives you a background of where we're coming to and where we're going. So then here we go in with the setup. We sat down again with Okta. With actually their auto version of it now. Then we sat with those other teams as well. Everybody was on board. It just, we decided to go forward with it, and in concept, it all worked. But we were still thinking along these lines of how do we maintain information across these web platforms? We're thinking, well, okay, if somebody goes into the member portal, if they pay their dues, okay, this is all an API system as well. It's not really going to work with a lot of 27,000 people doing things at once, right? But the problem became the enterprise system. That's the brain of all of this. That's running all of these processes. That's the background of it. So if there's an update there, it's not really directly connected to these web platforms if there's something happening on those. So we sat with the Auto team again, and they said, have you thought about Kafka?
Oh, here comes the data streaming guy.
Where the first seed comes in, right? So if you thought about Kafka, we have some customers that have had similar situations, and that seemed to work for them. You might want to explore that a little bit. And I had heard of it at that point, but I wasn't very familiar with it at all. And we started talking with the other teams as well. Everybody seemed to think conceptually it was okay, but I was the one who knew the most out of it, honestly. So it was not, we weren't in a really good position at this point. But I really dove into Confluent in particular. That, there's a lot of information on there that I went through a lot of the tutorials and the videos and read and got through there. And we all,
I'm glad you found all of that helpful.
yeah, we all agreed that Confluent Cloud would really be the way that we would want to go because of how it does host, it does really kind of handle all of the background stuff. Because, look, again, I'm the one that knows the most about this, and I clearly don't have the background. I'm not a Java developer, I don't have all of that going on in my background. So we didn't have the time to invest in all of that. So Confluent Cloud was actually perfect for this type of a thing.
You just reminded me of something. Someone once told me this, and I think it resonates. I think this will resonate with you. Someone said the only thing worse than writing code that you can buy is running a system that someone else will host for you, especially if they're experts in that particular thing. So I'm glad that what we build is exactly what you were looking for. So you don't have to think about how do you run Kafka at scale, or how do you run stream processing at scale. You just had to go and do what you needed to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you talked about Frankenstein. You talked about the new system that was built on top of data streaming. So now for the big moment, what were the results of the new architecture?
Well, we decided to go with using the enterprise system, and we basically set up a specific table in that system that would track the different data points that we needed to maintain across all of the different platforms. So this is information like, are they eligible to vote? Do they owe any dues? What is their status? Are they active? Are they on leave? Are they retired? These types of things.
God, you have to evaluate all these things, right? Before you can give them a vote or not. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. All of that kind of together lets you know, are you able to vote? In particular, it's really, are you current with your dues and are you eligible? We have some.
And are you doing that lookup as they log in? Is that when the check is done?
Well, the situation with them is happening all the time in the enterprise system. There's all kinds of different processes that are happening nightly. There's a billing cycle that happens once a month. And if somebody goes in and pays, it all automatically happens there. So when they come and log in, that's basically what happens.
It's all event driven, as it should be.
Yeah. So that's what we did. We set that particular table. We didn't want the entire database to be, sending on out. We just wanted that particular table. So we set it up inside of the enterprise system that particular table would have change data capture, heading the events going on out to Confluent source connector. So we got that information.
Right, so you had a connector, a CEC connector pulling from that database, emanating those events into topics. Yeah. Got it.
So exactly. Any change in, one particular member's situation, if they've paid off their dues, it's going to send that event on out. And so then we take that and we've connected that to Auth0. Now, unfortunately, that was not a direct, we didn't have a sync connector there. We had to, bring a little mini Frankenstein in there of Azure functions and all of that. But
you got to keep your Frankensteins as small as possible.
Yeah. I mean, there were things that we had to do, like if there's a new member coming in, we needed to create an account in Auth0. There were some extra, things that we had to finesse around the edges to make it really work. It couldn't just be a direct connection. So that was all right in the end. But yeah, that's the infrastructure. It's going from that enterprise system into Confluent Cloud, and then from Confluent over to Auth0. And then Auth0, as it was designed, it kind of controls everything across the different web platforms and has all of that information right up to date. So if somebody wants to go in directly to the voting site to vote on something, it's going to have them log in. It will grab that metadata right away, and it will know. And it will be able to tell them, okay, you're not eligible and you can do this. You can click here and you can get eligible. You can make your dues payment or whatever needs to happen. They can go to their member portal. They can go to the website, whatever needs to happen there. And it worked out beautifully. If you remember, I had said that on the strike authorization vote, we knew that a lot of people were going to vote for this, and we knew a lot of them were going to vote for yes. But really, even in the end with that one, we only had 93% of the total electorate that voted. You can see right here on the 2024, this is our tentative agreement one, our big contract vote. We had a 94.43% turnout.
That's fantastic.
Okay. And out of that, we had, 88.64 that voted yes. So it was overwhelmingly voted yes. Okay. And then if we compare to the last one on the left-hand side over here, this is a different story, right? This is 2014. This was our previous tentative agreement vote. And this is the most telling part of that story. We have the results here. It was 8,180 that voted yes and 8,196 that voted no. A
Oh
difference
my God,
of
that close.
difference of 16. And the answer was no on that one. So that was a different kind of a negotiations. It was a merger negotiation. So we didn't have that threat of a strike that we did now in this other one. So it's a little bit different. But really what happened in the end was it went into arbitration and they gave us the exact same contract, but they took away about 3 or 4 different prime features that we're still trying to get back now. So all because of, if we had had a little bit better voter turnout, a little bit something more, we wouldn't have to be crying about that now.
Right.
But
It shows you how important that, when it comes down to 16 out of 20, potentially 27, like that, having every person's voice count is so important. And the fact that you were able to build something with data streaming that got you to over 94% participation is really incredible, Todd.
yeah, we're very, very happy with how that all worked out, without a
Very
doubt.
impressive result. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, what were you hearing from your leadership if you could not improve that member experience, if data streaming wasn't able to, get you closer to 100%?
We'd run the risk of not approving a contract. We had already been, so think about this, we had been in contract negotiations for 5 years.
Wow.
We had COVID in there, so that's part of it. But
Yeah.
we got this came now just in November. I don't know if you're aware of this, but we can't just go out on strike when we want to. We have to be released from the government. to be
Right.
able
Just
to-
because of the
so it's very-
critical function. Yeah.
It's very rare that that happens. I mean, you have to just jump through a lot of hoops, and the president can come in at the last second and say no and all that kind of stuff. But they were getting pretty close to doing that. And that's what really kind of got American in line. So if we had delayed that to what's happening now, it would be a completely different situation. So it's paramount, really, if we didn't get this off the ground.
Yeah.
If we didn't,
Timing is everything, right?
yeah, exactly.
So after pulling off these impressive results, I got to ask, what's next for data streaming at APFA?
In particular, as flight attendants, and we have these different schedules with basically our monthly schedule comes out. It's a series of different flight sequences that each one has to fly, right? That information changes all the time. We have delays, we have reschedules, we have cancellations, all of that information is constantly changing. And right now, we don't have access to real-time information with that. I can definitely see, and we have kind of the proof in the pudding here of how this situation has worked, that we can set up something very similar to that in order for our members to be able to have that real-time access that they don't have right now. So I definitely want to be working on that.
What about stream processing? Do you think there's a future for kind of manipulating those events inside of your streams at APFA in the future?
I think so in the near future, really, because we do have a little bit of that right now. I mean, we get that information coming in, and then there's certain things we need to manipulate it. And we're doing that right now in Azure Functions because of how that had to connect with Auth anyway. So we're using it there, but I know we could also do it directly in Confluent Cloud. So that's something I can see we can streamline a little bit more. Definitely.
Yeah, if you ever take a look at Flink, they have my favorite mascot of like any tech. It's a squirrel, and I love squirrels.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a really big person. I could fit a squirrel in my pocket. And I love squirrels and chipmunks too. They're just
yeah.
So, this wouldn't be a tech show in 2025 if I didn't ask you this question. So I'm going to do it. How are you thinking about generative AI when it comes to data streaming in your role?
In a bit more of a longer term. So if we're able to get what I want, what I'm hoping to get set up is that kind of real-time access to our schedule information. If we have that, I believe that we'll be able to do some predictive.
Oh, okay. Like looking at the schedules, let the AI look for for trends and things like that.
Exactly. Trend, especially in terms of, we have our reserve flight attendants that they're just sitting there, they're just sitting around in case somebody calls in sick type of thing. And we don't really know, they just put a bunch of people that are available there, and it always, it makes people angry that they're used for sitting around for doing nothing. So I feel like if we're able to use some kind of predictive analysis, we can hopefully bring those numbers a little bit further down and a little closer to reality. We know, of course, over holiday periods, they're going to need more, but how many more? If we look at that over time, I think we can do something like that.
Yeah, see, that's why I love asking this question, because everybody's has some initiative, like something that they think that Gen AI can help them with, or machine learning. And it's always so novel to understand how you want to use it in a particular industry. So as you were saying that, like not only looking at trends from historical trends, but looking at things like, maybe viral outbreaks, right? Like the flu is going crazy in this particular area. We anticipate at least 2 call outs or something like that, just based on that. And being able to feed that real-time data, do something like stream processing to present it to something like AI so it can track that trending and then
Exactly.
maybe writing back into streams. That would be really powerful.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Well, that's fantastic. So, let's go into our next segment. So what are the top 3 tools you rely on for data streaming? And bonus, tools that you avoid like batch workloads?
Well, it's batch workloads that I avoid for sure. We'll start with that.
I love that. Just stay
And
away from batch.
yeah, I mean, honestly, that's one of the worst things that we have to deal with is like what happens if we have to, batch change all of our members at one point. That the system that we have set up right now, it's gonna have a backlog for sure because of the speed of auto, really more than the Confluent side. So that's something I don't like. Yeah, I mean, some of these that we've already talked about, Confluent's been amazing. There's no question about that. And I mean, we've had no issues once it's been set up. There were some issues of getting it set up, but once it's been set up, there's been no issues. Azure Functions has been good. I've learned a lot about that too, and getting that connected in there and making that work. Yeah, that's been really good. And Auth's been good too. And there could be some improvements there. I wish that there were a way to do a direct sync connector from Confluent into Auth, but it's more on the Auth side that they're not allowing that because I've pushed them. I've pushed all of that on both
Well, now,
sides.
see, your voice is going to be out there through the show. So
Yeah,
maybe other people
please,
agree and they'll ask
please
for the
put
same
someone,
thing.
yeah, because that would make my life a lot easier for sure, for sure.
That's
So that's
fantastic. So you have your data streams covered, your serverless processing, and some authentication, which is going to be, everyone needs that, whether that's on their top 3 list or not. So that's a really good stack. I appreciate that, Todd. Can you share a specific tactic that has significantly improved the adoption of data streaming at APFA? And I ask it because I know you guys weren't doing streaming. This is all brand new. So what did you use to kind of get that buy-in? So people were like, yes, we see the value in doing this work to get away from what we were doing.
Well, I mean, I think it was just the circumstances really, because we had that issue that was like, we have to solve this. And we were under a time crunch with it and it had to be done. So there wasn't a lot of deep thought of or comparisons on how to do this. It was really just, let's go with this and we'll figure out, the rest later at this point.
Right.
So
We
that was actually,
have to do this because we have to do this.
there really is no other way around it. And
Interestingly, in episode 1, my guest Tim Berglund, we talked about this in a slightly different lens, but he said, finding the pain, right, and finding the pain and saying, hey, your data streaming will help this pain go away. It seems like that pain made itself very evident to you, so you kind of backed into that kind of approach anyway.
exactly. And they can't say I didn't warn them because I said that from the very beginning. I said, this is the way you should do it.
I love that. So how does APFA evaluate and select new tools for their data stack? And how are you balancing factors like scalability, cost, and integration with existing systems?
Well, at this stage, going forward, it's going to change a little bit. But from when I came on until now, we were in this phase of negotiations. So there was a much larger budget that was allowed. Now that that's done, it's really come down. So there wasn't such a limit in terms of costs. It was more like, can this do what we need it to? That was really more of what they were trying to figure out. And what's the most cost-effective way and the quickest way to get there? That's really what we were talking about. And they really relied on me on getting the basics of that and presenting that to the leadership. We talk about it with our other teams as well, but they really kind of relied on what I had to say about it, and in most cases they'd go with it. But now that we've gone through all of the these issues that we've been trying to work towards for the past 5 years, now it's going to be time to really streamline and get the most out of our setup.
Fantastic. I love that response. So Now we'll get into segment 3. I don't always read the segment names, but I think this one's such a cool name that I have to. So our next segment is data streaming street cred. We've covered the tech, tools, and tactics, but let's face it, none of that matters if leadership isn't on board. So next, let's discuss the art of getting leadership buy-in. Now, I know you kind of already touched on this, so I'm hoping you can expand specifically into those like key stakeholders. How did you convince leadership to get on board with your solution? Was it smooth sailing or was it a bit of a roller coaster?
There was a little bit of a roller coaster. I have 4 that I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with a treasurer, a secretary, a president, and a vice president. And the one that I deal with on a day-to-day basis is mostly the secretary. I mean, he's actually the one that's like, no, we're not going to be able to afford this, and we can't do that. And he's really, really very, very conscious about the cost of every little thing, and he's not used to seeing the larger costs of. For me, I feel like every time I sat down with someone, it was going to be $10,000 for whatever service it was always $10,000.
Starts at $10,000.
It was just yeah. And so, he wasn't as used to that. With the treasurer, he was used to these things. He was dealing with phone systems and all of these other things. And he's more like, okay, yeah, he could kind of figure that out. And then the president was more like, we just have to have this working. And however we can get there, we've got to do that somehow. So, it was getting them all together and just making sure that the concept was going to work. And, a lot of it did rely on me. Am I going to be able to pull this off? I didn't have my doubts.
I'm glad you were confident, though.
my doubts at moments. But, fortunately, everybody's always very, very supportive at APFA. They really are grateful for anything that we can do tech-wise. And when we have an improvement, everybody just, it's really a wonderful atmosphere for me to be in, I have to say.
What were the primary objections you faced? I think you did. I think it was mainly cost, but were there any other objections outside of maybe cost from a time standpoint or just from a dollar standpoint that you faced from leadership or anyone on your teams?
I mean, we always have bickering on design things and that kind of stuff on day-to-day stuff. That was never a big deal. I'd say on some of the larger teams like the enterprise system, they were just like, okay, who's going to be responsible for maintaining this? And, how are we going to do that? Is it going to be us? Are you going to do it? You're going to have another person? That type of a thing, trying to figure that out. From leadership, though, it was really just, costs and can you get this done? Can you do what we needed to do? They didn't get too deep into, okay, is this version a better idea than this version? You know what I mean? Could we do this? What is an alternative to this? We didn't really get into too many of those.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Like when I think about your journey through buy-in, it was really about hearing the requirements of each of those different kind of stakeholders, right? And they were different, right? Someone's like, hey, we need this to be cheap. Hey, we need this to work, right? And I think by, addressing each of those individually, even down to something I think is very important, ownership, especially at post-implementation, which I think a lot of people forget. Like someone's got to run the system after it's up and running. By addressing all of those concerns individually, it sounds like over time you got all the buy-in you needed, and obviously the results speak for themselves.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've cracked open your playbook, we've unpacked tools and tactics, and we've explored your real-world win in building with data streaming. Now let's shift gears and to dive in something extremely hard-hitting. Our data streaming meme of the week.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
What we need to do now is get focused and stop pointing fingers. You're a problem. You're a real problem.
Yeah, like that was me thinking about you talking to Frankenstein. Like that was 100% exactly right. Where my mind went when I heard that meme.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. There were a lot of, you're a problem. You're a real problem. And it was people coming to me saying, yeah, why isn't this working?
And this is the reason I love this meme. Not only because I thought it was extremely appropriate with the conversation and your title and everything, is that this is a problem I think almost every enterprise has, right? Unless you're like digital native and like everything's a startup and you kind of maybe, figured out all your tech stack in the last 10 years. But that's not the reality for most companies, right? Most companies have been around for a long time. They might have things like mainframes. If they've been around long enough, they might have things like VAX systems. And they probably have some really bad pipelines, right? Through legacy tech, a lot of batches, things on cron jobs. And man, that once you start to build something new and you know you have that reality like you had in your relationship with Frankenstein, it's such a hard stop to innovation, right? Like once your data's flowing, there's so many things you can do.
Right. I mean, from when I came on, I was like, we need to scrap all of this and start from zero. We could, even a Ruby on Rails situation would have resolved everything that we needed to do. Like just, we had the server, could have built all of that stuff. But of course, we need a team to do that. And, you have to deal with what you're starting with and then try to make those improvements over time, and we'll see what we can get.
Well, listen, before we let you go, we're going to do a lightning round. So bite-sized questions, bite-sized answers, and that is BYTE. Sort of like hot takes, but schema-backed and serialized. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. What's something you hate about IT?
Upgrades. And when one thing,
Such a good answer.
Pictures and 10 things break. When you
have to do it.
Yeah. I've been living with that.
It's so painful. Yeah, that's a great response. It's the first time I've gotten that one, but
Uh-huh.
I think we all fear that upgrade. Like what happens after the thing reboots, right? What's the last piece of media you streamed?
Oh, I just was watching a visual album from a band called Mayana System. They just launched it. So interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like a video.
That's cool. So what's that? So like a YouTube video that is the full album?
Yeah, the whole album though, just kind of, it's a story, but it goes through each track and brings it to the end. It just launched the day before yesterday, so yeah, it's really cool.
That's awesome. If Pink Floyd were a modern band, I'd imagine all of their albums would be visual.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's a hobby you enjoy that helps you think differently about working with data across a large enterprise?
I'm out on the beach and out kayaking as much as I can, and then it just clears the mind, and then I come back refreshed and I'm ready to think about things in a different way, for sure.
So it's more about clearing the mind as opposed to doing something that kind of says, oh, we should do it that way. It's all about hitting that Zen state.
Yeah. Although I am a musician as well, and so there are those moments when I'm in the middle of something and it does, it comes to me like, oh, we could do it that way. Well, I'm in the middle of, I play piano, obviously.
I love that.
And it will come to me. You're right. I wasn't thinking of it in those terms, but yeah.
No, that's good. And I mean, I'm the same way. And anytime I hit a point of frustration, and this isn't just limited to my career, this is almost anything in life. I like to walk away from it. Like I like to completely remove myself from it and then come back with a clear mind, because once like you start getting emotional or frustrated, it makes it impossible to see clearly. So you getting out on the beach and clearing all up, I got to start doing that more often. A little tough because I'm in Arizona. Can you name a book or a resource that has influenced your approach to building event-driven architecture or implementing data streaming?
Honestly, it was the library at Confluent. I mean, between all of the documentation and there were a ton, really a lot of videos and courses. I did a good amount of them as I was looking through this whole option, this whole possibility of using this. And I mean, everything from setting up the CLI and all of that kind of stuff. It was really, really interesting. I learned a lot that way. I didn't really go to any other folks. I just kind of followed all the information that you had there.
Nice. Well, in that case, I'll plug docs.confluent.io and developer.confluent.io is where you found all that great information.
Yeah. And when I first started with Confluent, it was really, there wasn't a lot of support. It was just me trying to figure things out. So I didn't have somebody there yet to go to and see, not until we kind of signed up for an enterprise system. So,
well, I'm glad you were able to evaluate the system without actually, having to make an initial purchase. I know we do a lot of things that allow you to run things locally in Docker and kind of get your feet wet and understand it also. I'm really thrilled to hear that that's useful for you because, we all use it here and we try to, send these links out, but it's really nice to hear that people are getting value out of that. So what's your advice to a first-time chief data officer or somebody with an equivalent impressive title?
Equivalent. I love it. I would say, don't give up. Something may seem daunting. It seemed very daunting when they first raised the issue of Kafka for me, and nobody on any of my teams seemed to know where to go with that. And as I said, I just kind of dove in and started reading more and learning more and teaching myself a bit. Don't stop with that. Always keep learning and always keep going with things, and it will eventually work out. You're going to find your way.
I love it. Todd, any final thoughts or anything to plug?
I would say that I'm really excited about the future with Confluent, because there is a lot. If we're able to do my next plan, my next evil plan, I'll say, of getting that real-time sequence data, it's going to be a game changer for flight attendants at American Airlines for sure. So I'm very excited about that.
I hope you get that done and it goes well, because I really do. I agree with you. That will be huge for all of your members.
Definitely.
So thanks you so much for joining me today, Todd. And for the audience, please stick around, because after this, I'm giving you my top 3 takeaways in 2 minutes. Man, that was a great conversation with Todd. Here are my 3 top takeaways from today's episode. Data streaming, ensuring all voices are heard, right? So what they built at APFA on top of data streaming ultimately allowed those 27,000 members voices to be heard even louder than previously, right? So going from around 50% up to 94% or over 94% participation rate is just absolutely incredible, right? And I'm sure most of you have already been on flights before, hopefully in the United States or anywhere you've been, but you understand how much care and safety goes into flights, and the flight attendants being those shepherds of our safety and our comfort, and ensuring their voices get heard, ultimately probably to make the experience for us all better, is really fantastic. I love Todd talking about the Frankensteins, right? Or some people might call that dirty data integration. He called it a Frankenstein. I love it. And the truth is, even with modern architecture, sometimes you're going to have things that don't work exactly the way you want, but you want to keep those Frankensteins small. And the last thing I want to give you as a takeaway, his advice to a chief data officer: don't give up, right? If you know that event-driven architecture and data streaming are the right way to go forward, get those positives out there. Ensure you get buy-in from everybody. Keep doubling down, because it's very important to express why we're doing something, because change is not easy, and going for something legacy into something new is very hard. But once you convince people of the benefits on the other side of it, hopefully you can get their buy-in. So do not give up. That's it for this episode of Life is But a Stream. Thanks again to Todd for joining us, and thanks to you for tuning in. As always, we're brought to you by Confluent. The Confluent data streaming platform is the data advantage every organization needs to innovate today and win tomorrow. Your unified solution to stream, connect, process, and govern data starts at confluent.io. And if you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, tell a friend or coworker about us, and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time.